everyone. Hello. This is our fifth virtual and evening edition of If Cars Could Talk. We're very excited to host this program and for you to enjoy, and now from the comfort of your own home. So if you need to grab snacks, something to drink, maybe a blanket, if you're perpetually cold like I am, now's a great time to do that. My name is Kelsey Cross, and I am the education coordinator at LeMay America's Car Museum. For upcoming If Cars Could Talk and educational programs, please visit our website and subscribe to the museum's newsletter for the most up-to-date information. So before we get to all of the fun stuff, and I turn it over to Heidi and Jim, and we learn a little bit more about car photography tonight, I do have a few housekeeping rules to get us started. I realize most of you will probably be familiar with this since we've been on Zoom and other interweb apps like this for about a year now, but hear me out for just a moment. If you have questions while we are going through the presentation tonight, if you could type them into the Q&A box, we can answer them. For this particular presentation, our speakers do not mind answering questions periodically throughout the talk. So I will monitor the Q&A box. So please specify if you would like your question answered during the discussion or if you would prefer to wait until the end. Additionally, if you want to ask your question, you can also use the raise hand icon and I will call on you when it is your turn to speak, and you can actually speak it and ask it to our presenters. If you are having any technical issues during this presentation, please use the chat box, which is also located on the bottom of your screen in the Zoom toolbar, and I will answer them as quickly as possible. This presentation is being recorded. Please stick around though, but please feel free to share this video once we have it on our website and our YouTube channel with family and friends who may not have been able to make it this time. And of course, have fun. That's the most important thing. I really hope you enjoy these presentations that we do as much as I enjoy them. I've been really looking forward to this one in particular this evening. So thank you again for joining us on a lovely Tuesday evening. We really do appreciate you being here. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers and volunteer extraordinaires, Heidi Gies and Jim Culp. So you all have the floor now. I will go ahead and mute myself and turn off my camera, but if you need anything, I am here.
I'm pretty sure she didn't just say Heidi Gies, right? But anyway, hello, my name is Heidi and I'm going to get us started. I can't see anybody, so this is really bizarre. I'm talking to a screen here, but Kelsey wanted us to talk a little bit about who we are and how we got into this, and I'm guessing that most of you I know already, but I got into car photography because I was into photography. I have been for a long time, and then when I got into school administration, somebody suggested I get a hobby, and so I picked up photography again. My husband took me to the Family Collection Museum. It was before ACM was built, and I took photos there, and of course we belong to a car club now, and so I ended up taking a lot of car photos, and so that's kind of how I got started in the whole thing. But as we go through this today, what we're going to do is I'm going to start you off by having you, let me see if I can, oh, there we go. Having you just kind of consider why it is that you were attracted to, why you're attracted to cars. Just think for a moment why you're attracted to car photography and why you felt like you wanted to do this particular webinar. So think for just a moment before we go on about what it is that got you interested and got you started. Now, since I can't see you, I would have liked to have been able to have you kind of put your hands up and kind of indicate how it was for you. But let me ask you this. Did you get started because you have a passion for cars? You just love cars, whatever kind of car they are, old, new, fancy, it doesn't matter. You just love cars. Is it because you've got an interest in the design elements, the beauty of the automobile? Design elements are things like colors and lines and shapes and forms, the patterns in the car, sometimes even the textures in the cars. Is it the art of the automobile? Is it memories? Is it, do these, when you see cars, especially when you go to some place like a museum, are there something about the cars that bring back memories? And some of you have heard me say this before, but I had one woman come into the museum. We had the Restomods, restored and modified muscle cars that were there in one exhibit. And she goes running up to one of the cars. It happened to be a Roadrunner. And she yells at her family, "Come over here. This is the first car I ever stole." I wasn't sure at that point in time whether to be concerned because she'd stolen cars or it was the first one. But regardless of what it was, she went on to explain that it was her dad's car, but it was a memory that she had. I had another woman come through just a couple of years ago who was so excited. They were doing drive-alongs, and she saw that they had the Model T out, and that was the first car she remember her parents having and riding in. And so we got her into the car and she got to ride in a Model T. So it could be that. Is it the history? Is it the influence of cars on the nation, the influence of world affairs and world events on the cars? Is it the history of the automobiles? Regardless of what it is, for me, it's kind of all four of those things. But regardless of what it is, you're here for a reason, and you're attracted to the automobiles for some reason, and that probably shows up. If it doesn't already, it probably should show up in your photography. Now, the thing that's unique about the thing that's the photography and cars have in common, there's an art and a science in both of them. There's an art in automobiles, like we've just described, the elements, the beauty, the wonderful colors and the lines of an automobile. But there's also the science of the cars. How's it run? How's the engine work? The aerodynamics, which is a little bit of both. But there's that piece. There's the same in photography. There's the art of photography, and there's the science of photography. The art being about the composition, how you put your photo together, and the science being, what's my exposure? Where do I set my dials at? We're not going to worry so much about the science of it tonight. We're going to think more about and talk more about the art of photography. Given that we don't know, and we don't know what kind of cameras you use. You may be using a cell phone, a camera on your phone. You may be using an SLR. You may be using an iPad. A point and shoot. There could be all sorts of things you're using, and it doesn't matter for what we're going to do tonight. With that said, though, there are some basic rules that, especially talking about the side of it, there are some basic rules to consider. The rule of thirds, the idea of having the subject move into the photo instead of heading out of the photo. Horizon lines, rule of balance. There's other rules like the rules of odds and that kind of stuff too that you can consider too, but we'll talk a little bit about these before we move on. The rule of thirds just means if you were to take this photo and you were to put a kind of elongated tic-tac-toe board on it, the subject of the photo would be on one of those intersecting lines. Most artwork, most photos, whether in other kind of artwork as well, the subject usually isn't dead center in the middle. But with that said, it can be. And that's one of the things about understanding rules. When you understand the rules of photography, then you can understand when you break the rules and when you adhere to the rules. Moving into the frame. In this photo, you see this car is heading out of the picture. And so what it does is it makes the eye of the viewer follow that line of that car, and it heads out of the picture. And you want the viewer to be looking into the picture as long as you possibly can. Like it is in these. Horizon lines. Now there's different ways, and this may not be considered a standard horizon line, but thinking about lines in the photos, but horizon lines generally also, like the rule of thirds, are not dead center in the middle of the frame. They're usually lower if there's something of interest above the horizon line, like there is in this one with the bridge, or something, or higher if the interest is not in the sky. Now, this isn't a great photo, but it gives you that idea. Same thing here. The line across here, although it's not a traditional horizon line, the line across there, easily I could have taken that photo straight on with this line right down the middle of the frame, and it wouldn't have been, in my opinion, as interesting. The rule of balance just means that if you were to take this photo and take this whole piece where the bell areas, for example, scoot it all up to the top, and you'd have all this empty space, they call it negative space in photography, then it would look out of balance, and you'd start to kind of go, well, something's wrong here. Now, sometimes you want that because you want to add words, you want to add, something else into the photo. And so once again, you understand when you follow the rules and when you break them. But the nice thing about our digital photography world that we have now, that most people use, is that those rules are things to consider. They're not something you have to adhere to every single time you take a photo, because there is no one right composition. The right composition is the one that you want to take because you found it interesting. And with digital photography, you can take hundreds of pictures to get one. I think it was Ansel Adams that said something about a crop of 12 good pictures in a year is a pretty good crop. And he probably took thousands of pictures a year. So you just take as many pictures as you can and find out what you like, where you like the horizon lines, where's your balance, where's your, how do you play the rules of thirds, etc. So as we go through this presentation tonight, and I don't know, once again, I can't see who's out there, but once again, I don't know if we've got professionals out there. I don't know if we've got beginners out there. I don't know what kind of cameras you're using, but it doesn't matter. I hope that what you can do is, as we go through this, that you can find at least one or two items that perks your interest, that maybe you've forgotten about, or maybe you never knew about, and that's what you can take away from the presentation. So tonight, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to cover some basic ideas to consider. We're going to try to focus on the storytelling aspect of photography, about finding the personality in the automobile, and then we'll talk a little bit about the etiquette of photography, and especially when you're at car shows and at places like museum. We'll show you a few helpful tools, and then we'll give you some challenges or assignments when as we finish. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jim so that Jim can start to talk to you a little bit about telling the story of the automobile.
All right. Well, one thing before I really get started here, if you hear a terrible racket coming on your speakers, that's me. One of my neighbors is a flight surgeon, and for the last week or so, it appears that all the Cobra pilots from Fort Lewis have to fly by his house for inspection. So they come flying by periodically, and everything gets loud around here. Hopefully they'll give us a break for the next half hour or so. So I took this picture, by the way, and you've probably seen it everywhere. It's in publications and on the website. And I was stunned a year or so ago to actually see it on a billboard, one of the electronic billboards coming into Fife. The museum was doing some promotion and they grabbed my picture to use it in the on the billboard. That's pretty cool to see your picture on a billboard. I got into photography, unlike Heidi. I got into it purely by accident. I was one of those people who had some extra hours in high school, my last semester. And so one of the things I did was take some fun classes like photography. So I knew my way around a darkroom, but I was really not a photographer until one day when I was in college, about my second day on the job working for a small newspaper in the Los Angeles area. I was sitting at my desk at a typewriter, typing away, transcribing my notes from a city council meeting, hoping the editor would grace me with a byline and actually publish my prose. And my editor was my boss. Her boss, the publisher, walked into the room, looked around the room at the 2 or 3 reporters who were there, all of us college students, and said, "Who knows how to use a camera?" Like a fool, I said I did. And the next thing I knew, I was taking the world's most dreadful photos of these wonderful ladies from the local junior league gathered around a swimming pool. Awful lighting, awful reflections. They were beautifully dressed, but none of that was reflected in my photos. And somehow they got published, and the next thing I knew, I was a photographer. So people generally rely on visual information. One of the things I found out working for a newspaper is no matter how good your story is, you need a picture to suck them into the story. So what you see here is an example of a storytelling photograph. By capturing the logo in the background there, even though the lighting is terrible in this picture and there's really not a lot of great composition going on, it works to tell the story. Go ahead and flip to the next one. We'll talk about some other elements of telling a story. So what story are you trying to tell when you're taking pictures? And it can be any of these things and more. You can be telling the story of a car show, how much fun you have with the car, the speed, the power, any of these elements. And just go to the next one and we'll get into the depth of some of the elements. Next, please. There we go. This is a wonderful car. I'm not a Corvette guy. This is Bill Mitchell's 1959 Stingray Racer. Well, probably one of the greatest cars we've ever had in the museum. An amazing machine. But what makes this picture for me is a little guy in the green shirt who's sitting there admiring this thing, saying, "Wow, that looks like a spaceship." Little does he know it was made 40 years before he was born, 50 years before he was born, more than that. But still, it amazes him and it amazed me. So roll on to the next one and we'll talk a little about how, go to the next slide. There we go. One of the elements you can take pictures of are people working on cars, whether it's just cleaning the grass off the white walls at the Concours d'Elegance or seriously working on cars. The 2 gentlemen in the blue suits work for Vermont Sports Car, and they're in the process of changing transmission, drive shaft. They have about 35 minutes to do it between stages in a rally, but that's no problem for these guys. They're pros. One of the next one, please. And you can get pictures of people driving cars. The gentleman on the right is clearly a classic driver. On the left is a totally accidental picture. I was riding along with Chrissy trying to navigate on one of the Club Auto tours, and our little MGC pulled up alongside at a stoplight. Even though the background's terrible, I didn't see the background. I was totally focused on my two subjects and the two cars. But it's taking pictures of drivers is always an interesting thing to do. Go on to the next one, please. And we get into backgrounds. Backgrounds at car shows are typically terrible. The one exception I can think of off the top of my head might be the Greenwood Car Show, where you've got some pretty funky shops in the background on Greenwood Avenue, and you can get some interesting pictures of the cars. This is the Montesano Car Show, which takes place all around the streets of beautiful downtown Montesano. Some of the backgrounds are pretty terrible, but when you've got a 1940s vintage Hudson sitting in front of the house that might have been the home to the person who owned it in the 40s, it makes a great background. So cheat on backgrounds. Think about depth of field when you're looking at backgrounds, which is what's all in focus. So not just the front end of the car is in focus, but you can actually see the vintage cedar house too. And frequently use natural surroundings if you can get them. If you're taking portraits of cars, do that. Backgrounds are always good to look at. I typically forget about it till the last minute. But here's a couple of backgrounds which are easy to use at the museum, easy to grab at the museum. Our collection crew was out one day in our little Oakland Roadster, and I futzed around until I got it centered under the dome there because I liked the way that picture looked. The other picture has a lot wrong with it, but it was one of the very few times you could actually see the lights of the city through the window. And I got that one because I'm a volunteer. We had an event going on downstairs. I came upstairs and only the security lighting was on in the gallery, which is pretty unusual. You don't usually encounter the gallery with most of the lights off. And I noticed immediately you could see the lights of the city and thought that would make a neat picture. It'd be a neater picture if somebody'd move a yellow Ferrari off to the right. But I laid down on the concrete to take that picture and got the shot I wanted with the Ferrari in front of the skyline. One thing about both of these pictures are examples of how my favorite slogan is the best camera you can use for shooting cars is the one you've got with you. And these two are examples of that. They were both taken with various phones. I didn't have my camera with me at either of these two activities, but I had a phone in my pocket. And so I whipped it out and managed to get a shot using a cell phone. Can be done. And go ahead to the next one. So I spend lots of time trying to take pictures of cars in motion. A great Formula One photographer named John Blakewood called this freezing speed. And it's always fun to do. Nowadays, with digital photography, it's a lot easier to do because you can take lots and lots and lots of pictures at races, rallies, or just standing on the street corner taking pictures of cars driving by. And it's relatively inexpensive to take lots of pictures. In the old days, you were limited by the film on the rule, the numbers of shots you had on your roll of film, and it was a lot more expensive. This is Peter Giddings in his wonderful 1948 Talbot Lago Formula One car at Pacific Raceway. The picture on the left is one that most magazine editors would grab because it shows the intensity and the car clearly, and it's well exposed. The picture on the right's the one I like to show as freezing speed, because you can see he's in motion in that monster car, ripping down the back straightaway. Go on to the next one, and we'll talk a little more about freezing speed and how to do it. So how you capture cars at speed, in my mind, the best way is panning. Panning is holding your camera tightly, turning to look at where the car is coming from, following the car as it moves along the road, and shaking the picture when you get the car where you want it, and don't stop moving. Follow the car as it leaves your picture. That follow through is really important for panning. Everybody sees panning on race cars like the one on the left, but you can pan on street cars too. This is a triumph on our a Tour de Jour, a wonderful event we used to have before the concours, where people would take some great cars out and drive on roads in Pierce County and Thurston County. Great fun event. And go on to the next one. And have some more fun with panning. Panning can be lots of fun, lots of experiments with, especially digital. Porsche Speedster on the right. A few of you, I think, probably went on our tour a few years ago of Denny Akers' garage. Denny Akers being the Porsche guy in Seattle for years and years and years. This is his son in the Speedster. That's Mark Akers in his Speedster. The picture on the left is a couple of Formula 5000 cars. These are Formula racing cars with 5-liter Chevy engines in the back. They're loud, they're raucous, they're great fun to watch. And there was this maple tree at Pacific Raceway, which fascinated me. More than once, I would just shoot pictures through the leaves of the maple tree as the cars would race by. Again, panning to blur the maple leaves in the front of in the foreground, and capture the race cars at speed in the background. And go on to the next one. There we go. One of the dilemmas you have when you take pictures of race cars, rally cars, is what do you focus on? Back in the old days when there were magazines, I used to sell lots of pictures to magazines. And the editors of magazines will always give a choice between these two. In fact, I'd never even give him the choice. I'd never even submit the one on the right. He would always want, every editor I've ever met would always want the one on the left. They want close-ups, they want something showing action, but it's got to be well exposed, and it's got to show the car. That's the key to them. I like the picture on the right for telling the story. The picture on the right shows you what rally is about in the Northwest. It's blasting down logging roads at tremendous rates of speed and making it around corners. This is Dave and Rick Hentz and their BMW M3 up outside of Shelton, way outside of Shelton, up on South Mountain in the Olympic Forest. Go ahead. Here's another example of whether to shoot it wide or shoot it tight. Again, most magazines want the one on the right. I think the one on the left maybe tells the story a little better. This is the Brian Redmond parade at Vintage Races a couple of years ago at Pacific Raceway. One picture taken with my 300 millimeter zoomed out to 300 millimeter, which compresses everything. And the other taken with my 300 millimeter zoomed out to 70 millimeters to include some of the crowd and the grandstand and the background of the trees. Very appropriate to use this picture today because it's Ryan Redmond's birthday. So while he's sitting on some Caribbean island enjoying whatever it is he's drinking at the moment, we'll just have a little Ryan Redmond celebration here. Go ahead, go ahead. And here's a couple examples from film. I like both of these pictures. So one taken with my telephoto at the Nürburgring in 1968. Dan Gurney, my hero in Formula One, the All-American Eagle with a V12 engine. Not the greatest photo if we were trying to sell a photo, but I like it. The one on the right really tells the story of that weekend. The one on the left was a practice session on a Saturday, but it was just foggy and damp, but not pouring. The race on Sunday was foggy and damp and poured rain for most of the race. Probably the most miserable Formula One race anybody ever saw. And you can see the track at the Nürburgring, no guardrails, hedges, ditches, bumps, puddles, interesting place. And that's another example of how you've got a choice in shooting cars at speed. Shoot them close, shoot them far away, shoot them both. You've got the pixels to use. Just take advantage of digital technology and shoot lots of stuff. Go on to the next one and we'll change the subject a bit. Oh, I'm wrong. I forgot I inserted this one. So this is another example of how people make the story. Here's a couple of racers. Guy on the left, I don't know, I think he sold popcorn for a living. He was not a happy camper. He just spun out his car and was in the process of getting some help to get it back on track. And this fool with a camera stuck his head in by the door and started taking pictures. So Mr. Newman was not a happy camper. I got the classic look that you get from a lot of race drivers. They're intense, they're focused, and they don't want distractions like you. The guy on the right is Ken Block, a crazy man from Utah who drives strange vehicles and does strange things on YouTube. Look him up and you'll see what I mean. This was actually a photo shoot for DC Shoes. I was not doing the photo shoot. The professional photography crew was with their lighting rig and everything, trying to get things focused over off to the right in this picture. And Ken was standing there with a totally bored expression on his face. And I smiled and took his picture. And that's an example of how people help make the story when you include people in your automobiles, even racing photos. Now I'll go on and we'll change the subject.
We're about halfway through, Jim, by the way.
Okay. Here's a picture. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about illustrating personality. I mean, cars have personality. No matter what you say, cars have personality. Click onto the next one and we'll get into the points. And in photography, often is a matter of perspective. And your perspective can determine a lot about what you're trying to say. Are you trying to show power or fun or just classic elegance? Click to the next one. We've got some good examples. Perspective. Shoot it close. Show the elegance of that Duesenberg. Even the spring steel behind the bumper is, classically elegant. The brutish power of the Cobra shown at a low angle, looking up from the knockoff spinner up past the vent. And then perspective, getting in close and shooting that interior in close. And then you'll have to explain to people how that knob in the lower part of the picture isn't there to turn on the windshield wipers. Go on to the next one, please. The earlier slide talked a little bit about getting low. Some cars you really can't shoot from eye level, and the Ford GT being one of those. You know, I had to get down on my knees to shoot this picture, and it works better that way. You know, you're not looking down on the car. Although if you want to look down on the car at the museum, we have a wonderful spot to look down on the car, and that's from the cafe. Shooting down from the cafe, I think, is the only way to show this gorgeous art car that Peter Gleason owns, the BMW M1. I could never figure out how to photograph that car from a low angle and show the artwork. To show the artwork, you got to get above it and shoot down. And we've got some more examples on the next slide of interiors and how to get close for details. Interiors. Here's on the right is our wonderful 1939 Art Deco Packard. Incredible steering wheel. Since the first day I saw this car, I fell in love with that rotary dial speedometer and that clock. I mean, if that's not an Art Deco design on that dashboard, I don't know what is. That's pretty amazing to me. And it's still one of my all-time favorites of all the multiple dashboards we have in the museum. On the left is the Comstock family's 1951 Chevy wagon, which comes fully equipped with a picnic basket in the back, with a wonderful cloth to spread out, all the great Stanley thermoses, all ready for a picnic. We'll see that car again in a little bit. Go ahead. Get close for details. I mean, everybody of a certain age knows that detail on the left is a Shelby GT350. No way it can be anything else. That's the hood scoop on a Shelby. On the right is a little bit older piece of detail, a 90-mile-an-hour speedometer on a 1904 automobile. That's pretty amazing. And that's a great little bit of copper and brass fittings there. We'll go on to the next one. And if you're talking about details, everybody loves mascots. I mean, I don't know how many pictures I've taken of mascots. Every time I'm in the museum, I see people taking pictures of mascots. You can do lots of things to make them unique. Here, Heidi's taking a picture of mascot the Rain. By focusing on the lady chasing the donut across the top right there. I've totally blurred out the background. The Japanese have a wonderful word for that photographers have adopted called bokeh. And that's an example of that with the lady in focus and the background blurred. The Rolls-Royce emblem, Eleanor Thornton in the lower right. The first 3 or 4 times I tried to take that picture, this car is in the LeMay family collection. I was driven to distraction by the reflection of the blue paint on the amazing silver mascot. But after a while, I realized I kind of like the blue paint reflected. It kind of adds interest to the picture. So there's my example of Eleanor flying across a Rolls Royce. And go on, and I think we're ready for you to come back in, Heidi.
Yeah, so as a former high school and middle school administrator, I get the rules and the assignments. And so, so as we close up the last sections of this presentation, one of the things that you have to consider when you're talking about etiquette is, where are you shooting? Are you shooting at a show? Are you shooting at a museum? Are you shooting your own personal car in the driveway? Or maybe you've taken it to the park or the beach or something, but where are you shooting? So, so keep those things in mind. And number one in etiquette is be aware of your surroundings. When I am walking around, I do a lot of the photography for our car club. And when I'm walking around our show and taking photos for the club, I often have 2 cameras on. But if I'm not careful, those cameras can be bumping around. They can hit somebody that's walking around looking at cars. They can, heaven forbid, hit the car. So you just want to be aware of your surroundings. Who's around you? What's around you? That's why most museums don't allow you to use tripods, is because the tripod's legs come out and you've got all this stuff that can get in the way and just cause problems. So I'll show you some ways to get around that in just a moment. At a show in particular, talk to the owners, like you see here. Talk to the owners. I've never met a person with a car at a show that doesn't want to talk about their car. So talk to them, find out a little bit of the story about it. Let them know you're interested in what you like about their car. And then finally, don't hog the scene. If there's a lot of people at this show, I know one of the things we haven't really mentioned it here, we've kind of implied it, is that you want to work in photography, they call it working the shot. So you want to work around that car, take all the angles, take the high, low, corners, straight on, whatever you're trying to do, work all the way around the vehicle as much as you can. I know in the museum there's only so much space that so many places you can go. But don't hog the scene. If you have to go and come back, or if you have to wait for people to see the car, you're not the only one there. So so that's one of the things that gives photographers sometimes a bad reputation at car shows and things, is because people can't see through them to see what they came to see. So some tips as far as your equipment and stuff, some things to consider when you're taking car pictures at shows and at the museum. As Jim implied, blurring out the background here a little bit. Not so much bokeh in this one, but you see blur out so you don't get a distraction from the car behind it. But it's sometimes hard to keep everything steady, especially in places like the museum where things are sometimes in low light. So we'll talk about how you can work on that. Reflections. You saw some photos where we had reflections intentionally in the cars, but we'll again look at that a little bit. One of the things they don't show you a picture of here later on is what's called the lens hood. And the lens hood, the purpose of this hood, which I oftentimes forget all about, is to take away the lens flare. And what lens flare is when you take a picture and you see that picture and you've got these circles of light in the image, that's lens flare. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. That lens hood will help you avoid it. It's when the light, whether it's an artificial light or whether it's a sun, shines directly on your mirrors in your camera, and it causes those flares. Now, if you've got something like a cell phone, just putting a hat over the top of the cell phone will help to avoid some of that. And one of the things about car shows, you saw that one hood ornament that I took in the rain. Clouds are your friends in car photography. And so don't be afraid to go out and take pictures when it's a little overcast. That's the best time to take them. So some tools. I just show you here some of the tools that I like to use. Now I don't know if you can see my screen. I'm hoping you can. But what you see, this chain here, this is called works like a monopod. And what this is, my husband and I went down to the hardware store and we got enough chain for me to put underneath my foot and put it up to the bottom of the camera. I can hook it on the bottom of the camera, or I can take the other end and screw it into the bottom of the camera if I don't have this plate on the bottom. And then you stand on the end, or sometimes if I'm on the ground, I'll sometimes kneel on it, and you hold it tight and it works like a monopod. It gives you a little stability. Tripods. We can't take the big tripods into the museum, and I don't take the tripod around when I'm doing car shows, when I'm at car shows, but you can take these littler ones, these smaller ones around. This one, the bottom just screws out and you've got this, the legs are right here. And the other one wouldn't hold anything up very, very heavy, but it will work as well. And what I've got here, this other piece here, is just the top off of it's a tripod or monopod mount. It's the ball head. We call it a ball head. You can just set this on the ground and put your camera here. Now, with that said, if you've got a long lens on this and you put your camera here, it's going to fall over. So you gotta work with what you've got, what the equipment you've got. And my newest piece is in the background. There is a beanbag. Now, as I told Jim before, I wouldn't carry this beanbag around with me at the museum. It's too heavy unless I've got my husband with me, because he's my Sherpa. And so, but what you do is you can put the camera right through there, and right through the center of it, and it acts as a mount, as a stabilizer. You can put it up on a wall if you've got a wall someplace near, or a tree trunk or a rock. You can put it on the ground. I used it today. I went outside and did some flower photography, put it on the ground so I could get low, and just set the camera right here. This will also flip over so that the black section you see in the middle actually goes over the top of your window, and it becomes a mount on your window if you're taking photos from your car. A couple of other things, just tools for my DSLR. These are circular polarizing filters. They will help reduce the glare on an automobile when you're taking pictures, because most of the time at these shows and at the museum, of course, the cars are very shiny, and that makes it very hard to take photos of. This will also cut some of the reflection. So when I go to the museum and I take photos of cars and I find my red shirt in all the pictures, this would help actually reduce that so you don't see it. These are neutral density filters that just helps to, like in that photo that you saw earlier of the car on the beach, those would have made the sky darker or the car darker depending on which way I had it. This is just a cheap little easy tool that I made to kneel on, or my husband made it for me to kneel on. And this is actually a blanket from the museum, and the back side of it's vinyl, so I can lay it down on the ground and I can lay on it, and you can protect yourself and keep it from getting wet too at the same time. So with all that said, I know we're going to have some questions a little later on if you have them, but what we'd like to have you do, what the challenge we'd put out to you is to try some of this stuff. Hopefully you've heard one or two things that you hadn't thought about or hadn't used in a long time, or whatever it might be that you could try and see what you can do with your photography. One assignment is to take a photo of a car that shows its elegance, its power, or fun. You see the fun of this vehicle here. Once again, although this isn't a great photo, it shows more of the, although some people would say that's fun too, but the power of the vehicle. find a photo that you can take that takes into account what the lines and the beauty of these vehicles are. It was the color. A lot of times for me, it's the color. So it's the color that attracts me here, but it's also the lines of these of the scoops and just the angles of the automobile. It's the beauty of the car. And finally, take a photo that tells a story with a stationary vehicle or one in motion. Storytelling photography can be a story in one photo, or it can be a series of photos that tells the story of that event. This event was the Great Race. It can tell the history of the automobile, the Cadillac exhibit that we have upstairs, or gee, I don't know where I got all these pictures, these Mustangs, but the Mustangs in front of the museum. And so, you know, you can tell the history in your storytelling as well. So with that said, Kelsey, if you've got anybody who's got some questions, let us know.
Awesome. Thank you both
And
so
we
much.
thank you
That
for
was
being here.
wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I learned quite a bit. That was very, very informative. And I've got a lot of nice tips and tricks under my belt though. So thank you very much for that. While we wait to see if anyone has any questions, I thought of a few that I would like to ask you. So
Okay.
I like what you said, Jim, earlier about how the camera that you have on you is the best one to use when you're looking to take a picture of something. But I'm curious for both of you, because I know you both have cell phones, but what are the professional cameras that you use? I think if I remember correctly, you have a few, you each have a different brand that you are partial to.
Well, I don't know if we want to get into that. That's kind of like the Ford Chevy kind of thing, you know, so I don't know. I use a Canon, and I always have. No particular reason why I chose the Canon over the Nikon. It's just that's what I've always used, and so that's what I was familiar with. And I know, Jim, you use, you know, some other brand. I don't know what it is.
Brand X, yes. Brand N. I guess I fell in with the wrong crowd. I used a Nikon F when I was in college, and fell in love with the 35mm format and that for professional, especially action photography. So I picked up a Nikon film camera in 1967 in Japan, and have never looked back. I don't even know if I can remember how many Nikon cameras I have, but I'm currently using one of what Nikon calls prosumer cameras. They're not quite professional, but they're not entry-level consumer. It's an in-between camera, and it's got way more bells and whistles and computer power than I'll ever figure out, but it takes good shots for me, so I like it. The most important thing with either Canon or Nikon, the digital SLRs, is the lens, and I'm a real fan of Nikon glass, and so I've stuck with Nikon over the years, even though occasionally that Canon junk is better technically, probably, but I'd never admit that because I'm a Nikon guy all the way.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't use Canon lenses, not because I don't like them. I just can't afford them. So most of my lenses are Tamrons, and they work just fine for me. I did forget to show you one thing. We talked about reflections, and here's a quick little easy tool. If you can see this, it's just a piece of cardboard, piece of, you know, poster board with a hole cut in it, and you can put that up in front of your lens to cut your picture out of your reflection out of the car. So I forgot to show you that. But any more questions there, Kelsey?
Yeah, No, that was great. Thank you very much for that. I've contemplated getting a new camera and I've kind of been wishy-washy between the two. I've used a Canon in the past, but I would be open to trying a Nikon as well. I know they're both wonderful for various reasons. So, but yes, we do have another question, and it's kind of in line with one of the questions that I was wanting to ask too. So I'm glad that this person asked it. With digital photography nowadays, is most of the work done when taking the photo, or is editing able to correct some of the issues with that?
Good question, and that depends on what you're doing. If you're shooting in RAW, which is you can usually shoot your photos in JPEG or in RAW. In some of the DSLR cameras, and I don't know about some of the other ones, but in some of you can choose to do both. But RAW gives you more ability to change things when you get into the computer. But everything that I've read and what I try to do is do as much of I get the picture as much as I can the way I want it in the camera. So when I'm taking the photo, you can do some on the computer, and you can do quite a bit with various different, there's lots and lots of different photo editing pieces. And you can do lots on there. And now there's a process called HD photography, where I can, and I haven't done any of this, but you can take 5 or 6 photos. Like you see the picture here of the Cadillacs in front of the window. I love the Grand Gallery, but that window where you've got the cars in front of it, oftentimes you either get the cars in silhouette, or you get the photo, or you get the window all blown out. You know, too much light there. And so what you can do is in post editing or post camera is you can take 5 or 6, 7 pictures, all from the same. You have a tripod, so you take them all from the same location, just change the exposure on them, and then you combine them, and you get the best of all the photos. And like I said, I haven't done that before. I'm a little afraid to do it. I'd rather just pretend like I was trying to take a silhouette. So I don't do that. And I don't know what your answer is, Jim. I do some editing on afterwards, but not, I try to do it mostly in the camera.
Well, I played with that a little bit to play with adding depth to pictures. But I'm an old school film guy, and working, trying to sell pictures to magazines and newspapers and things. Getting the shot was, let's see, how can I say this? The shot was not as important as getting a shot there on time. So when your editor has a deadline, if you can get a picture there on time, it's more important than having the most perfect photograph. Many times I have seen people take far better pictures than mine at some of our events, but mine are the ones that get published on the website because I get mine to the folks, if we're talking about the museum, the people who are putting pictures on the website, I get them to them within hours of taking the picture. I am deadline driven. I've been that way since, I first read the Associated Press Photographer's Manual, and that's the way I think about photography. So I do occasionally use some minor editing tools. I am not a big Adobe Lightroom Photoshop person. Many years ago, I fell in with a bunch of strange Australians, and I use a product called ACDC. They have offices in Australia and developers in Vancouver, BC, and they're great folks to work with. It was probably the best photography storage for digital storage and archiving digital images and being able to find them quickly. It was probably the best system for that before Lightroom came along and all the Adobe people caught up with us. But I'm sticking with the AC/DC guys. It's got some minor editing tools, and that's what I prefer. I think my daughter's got a current Adobe license to use Photoshop. I don't. So, you know, I'm not an Adobe expert. I'm not an artist. I'm a photographer. I'm a photojournalist. I'm taking pictures and getting them up quick. That's the thing I do. So not a lot of post-processing for me.
When I use it, I use Photoshop Elements, which is a simpler version of Photoshop. So it's, you know, Photoshop is what I've read is really for the professionals, you know, and I don't get that detailed in the editing, but the Elements has everything I need to do. I might mention, you, as Jim mentioned, Australia, there is an organization that's got a website. It's called Digital Photography School. And the reason I mention it is that they have a current contest out right now, and I don't know how long it's going to be out, but there's a lot of articles, if you don't even enter the contest, but there's a lot of articles that happens to be, the theme happens to be car photography. So it's Digital Photography School, it's DPS, you know, but.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that opportunity. We do have 3 more questions that just popped in. So related to camera equipment, I know we were just talking about that a little bit, but Layla is curious as to what is your favorite lens and why?
How do I hold it up? Oh, there it is. Oh, there, camera. Oh, no, it's going to go away. Okay. I'm in love with my little Nikon 16 millimeter to 80 millimeter zoom. It's a really wonderful tool. 16 millimeter gives you a lot of width. In case you guys haven't noticed, cars are horizontal and they're long and low, and you need a lot of width to be able to get an automobile in a frame for capture. So I like my little 1680. Right now, that's my favorite. It may change. It frequently changes. I take a lot of racing rally pictures, semi-retired from racing, but I still get stuck taking a lot of rally pictures for different people and organizers and teams and manufacturers and stuff. And I love going to see the first time rally photographers who come out with 600 millimeter zooms, and then realize with 600 millimeter, you're going to have to be behind about 18 trees before you'll be able to get far enough away to get a picture. You got to have something reasonably wide angle because you're going to be close to the action in rally, and there's just too many trees in the woods to get in your way. But so that's why I like relatively short lenses and lots of zoom capability, so I can play with them and not have to do it in the dark room, but do it while I'm taking the picture.
Yeah, and my favorite is my Tamron 18 to 200, and for a lot of the same reasons that Jim just mentioned, is that first of all, it's DSLR cameras are heavy, and I haven't committed to going to the cameras yet because I've got all this equipment. I don't want to spend all the money to replace everything, but this gets that wide angle look. And I have the telephoto to a certain degree, all the way up to 200. So, I can do. I like the close-ups. I don't do as many of the wide angle stuff. Even when I'm taking nature photos, I don't do a lot of the landscape stuff. I like more intimate pieces of the car. I like more intimate pieces of the landscape. And so I like that length to be on it, but this camera, I've got a couple of different camera bodies, and I can put that lens on a camera body and I can shove it in my purse and walk around with it. Because what they tell you is if you're going to be a photographer, you're supposed to take your camera everywhere. Now with phones, we've all got a camera with us everywhere, but I think what they were talking about is having your camera with you. But I don't know that that's necessarily the same message today as it was years ago. But like I said, I can shove that lens with my camera in my purse and then have pretty much everything I need for whatever I wanted to take pictures of. But
awesome, thank you. Next question. This one's a really good one. Do you have a favorite car that you love to photograph and you keep coming back to over and over?
Not me.
Let me see.
Go ahead, Heidi. I know she's going to answer.
Well, the ones you see on the screen here, the Mustangs, of course, I take a lot of pictures of Mustangs because for those of you who I don't know that are here at this presentation, I'm the president of a Mustang club. And so I end up taking a lot of pictures of Mustangs. In fact, I joke about, I love going to open shows because there's cars there that aren't Mustangs. And I think I've taken about every angle of a Mustang that I can possibly think of. At the museum, and I can't remember the name of the color, but it's the Lincoln that's down by the photo car. It's a beautiful yellow with a tan, I think it's about a 30s, a tan convertible top on it, and I just love the color of that car and the contrast of the colors and the ornaments, and so I come back to that a lot. I like the I mean it just depends. I walk around the museum a lot of times when I'm volunteering. I'll have my camera with me, and when there's slow time, I grab whatever pictures I feel like at the moment, whatever I feel like doing. But
what about you, Jim?
So I don't have a real favorite. I guess if I had to pick one, it'd be a Ford GT. I like taking pictures of them on the racetrack and in the museum. But I don't know. I don't have a real favorite car I like to photograph. I have a real favorite car I'd love to photograph, but I haven't yet. And that's that 1939, that little brown Ford coupe, stuck in the corner in Lucky's garage. It's next to a pole and jammed in next to another car. There's no way to get a good picture of it in that location. So, hint, hint, Renee, if you pull that car out in the middle of the aisleway there, boy, I would be in heaven. That's a neat little car, and I'd like to get a good picture of it.
Well, Renee is listening, so maybe she will, and she'll grant your request next time you're in the museum. Awesome. And then
Renee could give this presentation.
Absolutely. We do have one last question, and I think it's a very appropriate one, and I'm happy to answer it too. But Bob wants to know, any update on the museum opening? Yes, Bob. So as far as we are aware, unless some other weird circumstances happen, we plan on opening in April. So we will be open the first week. We will be opening April 2nd, and we will be opening on a limited basis. So Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 10 to 5 p.m. We hope to open and expand those hours as we go further into the year, hopefully during the summertime. But for right now, it'll just be Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 10 to 5 p.m. starting on April 2nd. So yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully we can see a lot of you back in the museum soon. I know I definitely miss having people there and having my students in there and just everyone. So hopefully very soon. But yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. So Wonderful. I know we are past time at 7:09, but that was great. Thank you both so much for putting together this presentation. It was wonderful. I learned so much, and I have a lot of other tools now I can put in my belt and use when I need. So thank you again to all of you who attended tonight and asked questions and participated. We really enjoyed it. Having you here as well. Again, this video, this presentation has been recorded. So if you want to watch it again later, or if you want to send it to any friends and family, it will be on our website and it will also be on our YouTube channel. And I think that's it. Thank you all again so much for coming, and we hope to see you soon. Our next If Cars Can Talk will be April 13th on Tuesday. So again, head to our website for the most up-to-date information on that.
Great, and I wanted to thank everybody for coming too.
Yes. Yep. Thank you all again so much, and have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you at the museum soon. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.